So the type of statement that seems to be the most difficult for folks to effectively defend, to effectively explain why it's a true statement, is the conditional statement, the if-then statement. These kinds of statements tend to produce the weakest defenses. And I think it's because folks don't think carefully enough about what exactly is going on in a conditional statement, and given that, what kind of approach is required in order to offer an effective defense. All right, so here, take a look at this argument. It's your favorite one. If it's snowing, then the mail will be late. It's snowing, therefore the mail will be late. And we can see that the very first premise is a conditional statement. Now, what folks will oftentimes do when they're confronted with a conditional statement like this is they'll look at their truth table for conditional statements, and they'll notice that, hey, you know what? When the left-hand side of the horseshoe, the antecedent, it is snowing, is true, and the right-hand side of the horseshoe, the mail will be late, is also true, the horseshoe's true. So all I need to do is explain why I think it's snowing and why I think the mail will be late. And that's going to lead to a really poor defense. Here's why. If I say to you something like this, if you're listening to me talk about logic right now, then the parking lot at Murphy's Market is paved. That's a true statement, right? Because you are listening to me talk about logic right now. So the left-hand side of my conditional statement is true. And it's also true that the parking lot at Wildberries is paved. So this side is true. And that seems like a really weird statement to make. And then for me to just walk away and say, oh, proved it true because I proved both sides of the horseshoe true, kind of misses the mark, because there's a relationship that's being implied about these two statements on each side of the horseshoe. Right? And what you want to know is, well, wait a minute. Why is it sufficient to know that the parking lot is paved if I'm listening to you talk about logic? Because these two things don't seem to have anything to do with one another. And that's how we miss the mark when defending these premises, is we ignore the fact that in a conditional statement, it's implied that there's some kind of relationship that exists between these two statements that are on each side of the horseshoe. And that's where we really want to focus our attention. We want to focus in on the idea that the statement on the left-hand side of the horseshoe is a sufficient condition for the right-hand side of the horseshoe being true. What is it about that left-hand side that it being true makes the right-hand side true? And you might even think about it a little bit like cause and effect. Why is it that this statement on the left-hand side being true causes the statement on the right-hand side of the true? It's not entirely correct to talk about it that way, but you might think about it that way at least a little bit. So you'd think here you've got this statement, if it's snowing, then the mail will be late. If I'm going to offer an effective defense of this, I want to explain exactly why I believe it's the case that it snowing is a sufficient cause for the mail to be late, okay? Or a sufficient condition for the mail being late. So one thing I might do is I might boogie down to the post office, and I might ask to see their records of mail delivery times. And I want to look at all the times that it's been snowing, and what the frequency of late mail deliveries were on those days, and all the times that it's not been snowing, and what the frequency of late mail deliveries are on those days. And maybe I'll see a pattern there. Maybe I'll see that in the past, when it's been snowing, the mail has in fact been late. Compelling evidence? Maybe. I'm going to want to think about how I'm going to explain why what's happened in the past is likely to also happen in the future. Right? So I'm going to want to look at things like, well, have they been given those mail carriers, have they been giving them special training on how to drive in the snow so that they can drive more effectively when it's snowing and increase the frequency of on-time mail deliveries when it's snowing? Have they equipped the mail trucks to be better at driving in the snow? Does the post office have plans in the future, because of these late mail deliveries when it's snowing in the past, to send the mail carriers out earlier in the morning so that the mail comes on time when it's snowing? Okay, and so I'm going to want to think about all of those things so that I can marshal those things forward and say, here's why I believe this statement is true. I think that it's snowing is a sufficient cause for the mail to be late. Okay, so when we're thinking about defending our conditional statements, we really want to get in there, and we don't want to just focus on the two statements that comprise the conditional statement and explain why one or the other is true or both are true. We want to show why the antecedent, the statement on the left-hand side of the horseshoe, is a sufficient condition to cause the consequent statement on the right-hand side of the horseshoe to be true.